Guruve Gaura Chanjaya Radhikaya Tadale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhe Vacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dandavat Pranam. So I just want to try to catch up on some of the questions and answers. And also some devotees asked me about posting the Sunday Zoom classes. I did get, I think, one in the email from the host or facilitator of that class, and as soon as I can get it out and so forth, so on, I'll post that Sunday sort of Ishtagosti or Harikatha. The question that came up today was, actually it's a couple of weeks old, and I'm apologizing, Prabhuji, for taking a little while to get around to answering it. Via our discussions we've already had on Messenger, hopefully some information was given, and I know you wanted, for the sake of some other friends or associates, to have some explanation via this forum here. So one thing is that, as I mentioned to you in the chat in Messenger, discussion of the Diksa Mantras is something that normally goes on between Guru and disciple, because there are several elements to the Diksa Mantras. One is the Siddhant. The Siddhant regarding Diksa Mantras, that's something that can be discussed publicly. The Rahasya means the inner meanings of the Diksa Mantras, and the Dhyan or meditation regarding the Diksa Mantras, that should be heard from Guru to Sishya, or Siksha Guru to someone. So that's not really something to be discussed in open forum. Dandavat Sadhana Prabhu and other devotees. So that external part we can discuss, and its relationship, as you asked, to Harinam can be discussed. One of the other questions that was brought up was, well, let me just enumerate the questions. That's going to be the best way to go about this. So one was, what's the relationship of Harinam and Diksha Mantras? Secondly, are Diksha Mantras actually necessary if Harinam fulfills everything? And third, is the primary reason for giving Diksha Mantras to allow someone to do service on the altar or to do deity seva? So answering the first question, the relationship between Harinam and Diksha Mantras is that when any aspirant enters the arena of faith, that means someone has come from their material absorption, and by the good fortune of some acquired sukritis and the kripa of Sri Bhagavan and Guru, a person comes into the fold of Shraddha. Bhagavad Bhaktistu Sangena Parijayate Satsanga Prapyate Pumbir Purva Sukriti Sanjate. So, by previously acquired sukriti, a person has the ability to obtain sadhu sangha. Of course, it is not only the sukriti or pious activities of someone, but it is also the kripa shakti of Sri Bhagavan manifest in a Paramasvatantra Bhagavad Bhakta. So Paramasvatantra means that if you read Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Pad's Madhurya Kandamini, you'll see that Bhagavan gives special independent power to the Bhagavad Bhakta in order to be the vehicle of dispensing bhakti. And the first element of bhakti that is dispensed is the mercy to give shraddha in the jiva. Because under the influence of avidya, the influence of shraddha does not take its natural course in the jiva. In other words, due to the jivas being abhinavesh, means fully absorbed in material life, they don't develop faith in Bhagavan. And as I mentioned many many times, Swato na sambhavanti anya, gyanatva ganadobhavet. It does require that other person, someone outside the aspirant, to instill Shraddha. It's not something that you can do on your own. It comes from the contact with a sadhu. So, when the Sukriti file, means the accumulation of pious activities, and Kripa have their intersection, then Brahmanya Brahmati Kon Bhagwan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Poi, Bhakti Lata Bij. Then any jiva will come in contact with Sadhu Guru, and at that time they will receive the what is called the Ratnya Ankur and the Bij, right? Like in that verse, right? Bhakti Lata Bij. So the Bij that one receives is what's called Mati. Due to some, again, previously performed Bhakti Unmukhi Sukritis, means pious activities related to Bhakti, not just anything, right? You're very charitable, you're very this and that. That will give you good karma. But Bhakti Unmukhi Sukritis, or those pious activities related to Bhakti, you gave a donation and took a book, you honored some prasad from a Harinam party, you heard a Harinam party. Any of these things will give an inclination towards being able to accept the kripa coming from the influence of a sadhu. And at that time, when that happens, something called mati takes place. What is mati? It is understood best by the example of Srila Sanatana Goswami Pad. When he met Sriman Mahaprabhu, he asked two questions. Ke ami, kene amai, jare tapatrai. Who am I and why am I suffering? So anytime that question arises in the jiva, it is the indication that mati has come. Means discrimination. What is this? Why am I suffering? Is there more to the world than just birth, old age, disease, and death? Or just going to work and making money? And so when those kind of questions arise in the heart of the jiva, this stage is called mati. Then by the association of sadhu guru, one receives the inclination to answer those questions via the path of bhakti. At that time, they develop Krishna Seva Vasan, the tendency of turning towards and serving Krishna in order to fulfill the reality of their true identity, etc. Right? And that can only come from knowledge given by sadhu guru. At that time, faith takes place in the jiva. That faith or shraddha has a particular kind of potency. That potency is that it breaks the abhinavesh or material absorption of the jiva. Shraddha anupayani varajam bhakti unmukhi chitta vritti visesh. So what it does is chitta unmukhi bhakti unmukhi chitta vritti visesh. So bhakti unmukh means it turns the consciousness of the jiva towards Bhagavan. And once it turns the consciousness of the jiva towards Bhagavan, the chitta vrittis start to accommodate the influence or prabhav of bhakti. So your chitta, your consciousness, is just like, it's a very deep thing because there's so many functions that the chitta does. Even everything you visually see in the world is just a transformation of your chitta. We say the vision is coming from the eyes, but actually the eyes are simply a sense that captures something. The chitta is what makes that thing come into the understanding and the consciousness of a jiva. It's a little difficult to explain. It's like if you see a table, you see a car, right? It's not your eyes actually that are just seeing the thing. It's the functions of your chitta that are creating that image in your own consciousness and therefore informing you by previous information through your intellectual facility. This is a car, this is a table, that's a human being, etc. So it's not just sight and the eyes that are at function here, but it's the chitta. It's the chitta that's making the transformation of those impressions coming into the eye, transforms on the chitta, takes that shape and informs you what it is. So bhakti unmukhi chitta vritti visesh means when now the impressions of bhakti come on the chitta and start to reveal the nature of bhakti or devotion on the chitta. Once shraddha takes place, that is the leanest earliest and first sort of seed of love itself. And it will start to grow in incremental stages through then understanding what is truly sadhu sangha. I've explained these things before, so maybe not going completely through all these things, but sadhu sangha, and obviously from the sadhu, you receive both bhajan siksha, the instructions how to perform bhakti, and kriya shakti, means the potency or power to perform that. And here is where the Diksha Mantras become very important. First, which we used to hear, that initiation is twofold. One is Harinam, where you receive the holy name. But actually, Harinam does not require any process. Sriman Mahaprabhu explained in the second verse, second verse? Yeah, second verse of Shishashtakam, Nandamakari Bahuda Nija Savashaktas Tatrapita Niyamita Smaranena Kala. Yes, second verse, right? Niyama means rules and regulations. And according to Sastra, Diksha or initiation is a rule and regulation of Sastra. Harinam does not require that. Therefore, the giving of Harinam is not really an initiation, but the Acharya does this to mark an impression, a sanskar, a bhakti sanskar in the jiva. Because actually no special kind of niyam, means rule or regulation, can be applied to Harinam. Therefore, it can be remembered at any time. Smaranena kala, there's no rules and regulations. Whereas when you do receive Diksha Mantras, they're to be chanted at a particular time, facing a particular direction, under particular conditions of cleanliness, etc., etc., etc. You understand? So Harinam is not really an initiation. It is like a sanskar that marks an impression in your heart or in your consciousness. What Sri Guru gives at the time of giving Harinam is his own kripa or mercy of seva vritti, or the tendency of service towards Sri Bhagavan, who's present in the akshar or letters of his name. Because Bhagavan, Sri Krishna, is absolute, abhinatam nama namyo. There's no difference between the name and Bhagavan. So we can understand that practically by any example in the material world. You cannot chant the name of any object, and just by chanting that name, that thing is present, or any substance of that thing is present, right? You may remember something or remember something about the thing, but the actual substance of the thing is not there. But because Bhagavan is Advaya Gyan Paratattva, means it is absolute principle, when you chant the name of Krishna, Krishna is present. Our inability to experience that is due to the covering of the chitta, right? Means our consciousness is covered in such a way that there's no access, because we're still so dependent on the external sensory perceptions. And in Sastra it's clearly mentioned. What is this verse? Namani nabhavad grayam indriya. This is what I'm looking for. You cannot experience Krishna by grayam indriya, means the material senses. Ataha Shri Krishna namani nabhavad grayam indriya. You cannot experience Krishna by your material senses, right? So even though Krishna is present in his name by the principle of being absolute, we cannot by material facility access that. So our senses have to become purified to a point where the dominant nature of the function of the chitta is related to the Atma itself, the soul itself. And from that perspective, one can then have access to the experience of Bhagavan being in his name. Still, we cannot change the fact that Bhagavan is present in his name. You understand? So when Guru gives Harinam, he's giving Nam, meaning his own Kripa Shakti of Seva, to Sri Radha and Krishna in the form of their names. You understand? Now, what is the relationship of Diksha Mantras to that Harinam? The Diksha Mantras are the means by which Sambandha Gyan, or knowledge of relationship, is given in relationship to Radha and Krishna. You understand? The name is Radha and Krishna themselves, but what is my relationship to Radha and Krishna? There is a generic reality that we're all the Das of Krishna. Jivera Swarupoye Krishnera Nityadas. But being Tatashta Swabhav, Jivera Tatashta Shakti Bed Abe Prakash, we don't have realization of that reality of Dasatva. You understand? It is a constitutional reality, right? Dasabhuti Harieva Nanyasheva Karachana. That's a constitutional reality. Whether you're aware of it or not, you're the Das of Krishna. Now, when we come into the process of bhakti, that generic reality of being the Das of Krishna is activated. In the general populace who are unaware of that fact, that principle is not activated. So they're operating under the auspices of avidya or illusion or maya, and they're not recognizing that fact. But when we come into the paradigm of bhakti, then by Shraddha, etc., that's awakened. I'm the Das of Krishna. But how I'm the Das of Krishna is not awakened. That becomes awakened when Sambandha Gyan is given. And the Diksha Mantras are explained in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Bhakti Sandarbha by Jiva Goswami Pad, by describing what is the nature of those mantras. They have two functions. Diyate Param Gyan, Kshiyate Papanasan. So Kshiyate Papanasan means to destroy the things which are adverse to realizing or understanding how we're the Das of Krishna, what relation we have with Krishna. The power to remove those anarthas, distractions, sins, that power is invested in the Diksha Mantras as well. Of course, we could say, well, Namnam Akari Bahuda Nija Sava Shakti. Everything is there in Harinam. True. But it is enhanced by our relation to Harinam. You understand? So even though everything is present in Harinam, we're developing relationship to Nam. And the Diksha Mantras have this potency, that they can reveal relation to Nam. And that will personally remove all of the ignorance, anarthas, so many different things, which afflicts the chitta or consciousness of the jiva. Right? So, the other thing that's given, which makes this possible, is called Divya Gyan, or transcendental knowledge. What kind of Divya Gyan? Divya Gyanam Hyanta Shimanti Mantre Bhagavat Surup Gyanam Tena Bhagavan Sambandha Visesh. Bhagavan Visesh Sambandha Gyan. So Visesh Sambandha Gyan means, the word Visesh means what is particularly or specially my individual specific form of dasatwa that I have towards Bhagavan. Because when you're practicing in a relationship that deals with love, then the love is very one-pointed. It's called ekantic. It's one-pointed. Just like we have a general relationship with humanity, and therefore any lady has a general relationship in humanity to all men. But she has a very specific relationship with her husband. And of course the application vice versa as well, right? Or even in a parental sense. There are many senior mothers in this world, but we have a relationship with our biological mother. You understand? So there's some vaishishya or speciality about that relationship. In the same way, we all have a very special individual relationship with Sri Krishna, or Radha Krishna specifically. Right? So in the Diksha Mantras, the seed of that Visesh Sambandha Gyan, that special relationship, is given at that time. Now, of course, some elements have to be there. One is, Sri Guru has to be in a position to dispense that insight to the Sishya, to the disciple. And the disciple's maturation from previous and current samskars, or previous and current impressions, will determine how much of the Diksha Mantra potency they can digest at that time. For some devotees, they will simply hear the mantras, right? And hearing the mantras, they'll get a sheet of paper, just remember these mantras, chant them 3 times a day, 10 times each, right? And then specifics will be given about how to manipulate your sacred thread. It's called Janoya Upavit, right? And so forth and so on, where you should hold your hands like another sage by your heart. These things will all be given, right? But what is the elements of the Diksha mantras like mantra artha chintan. The word chintan means contemplation. To contemplate the meaning of the mantra. Therefore, you have to really know what is the meaning of the words in the mantra, and you have to understand what is the sort of spoke. Spoke means like the epiphany or realization to be gleaned from those words. Like somebody speaks poetry, right? So one thing is to understand the word construction, or the meaning of the words, rather. Secondly, is to understand the intent of the poet. They put together a group of words which you can analyze word by word, but then you also need what was the intent of the poet to bring it together as a epiphany in your consciousness. Oh, wow, that was really beautifully said. You understand? What was the intent? It wasn't that you're saying the word construction is only beautiful, but the intent communicated in the poetry was beautiful. In the same way, mantra artha chintan, we'll have to know the meaning of the words in the mantra, but as well the intent inherent in the mantra. Overall, we know it's to give Sambandha Gyan. So we would not, for instance, in the first mantra of our Gayatri series, right, different institutions have different regulations around that. For instance, in Gaudiya Math, ladies do not chant Brahma Gayatri mantra, right? But actually the Kam Gayatri mantra, the last of the mantras that we chant, if you read Padma Purana, it describes how that Brahma Gayatri, being the wife of Lord Brahma, there's a whole pastime. That Brahma Gayatri in its maturation is Kam Gayatri. So ladies are certainly not bereft of the influence of Brahma Gayatri. Rather, they're getting Brahma Gayatri in its mature form. You understand? So, some have understood that that first mantra indicates some relationship with Surya Dev and so forth, with the sun and intelligence. And you have to be clear by the overall perspective of the intent of Sambandha Gyan related to Radha and Krishna. So all of the mantras have that intention, to reveal Visesambandha Gyan in relation to Radha and Krishna. You understand? That's what the mantras are for. So I can quote because it's there in Chaitanya Charitamrita and Ramananda Sambad. Kam Gayatri is the culmination of the mantras, and it's clearly mentioned there. Vrindavane aprakrita navina madan kama bij kama Gayatri yanrupasan. That the Kam Gayatri is meant both by its bij and by its actual mantras to do upasan to Vrindavane aprakrita navina madan. So this description is Krishna, especially Krishna related to gopis. Because the nature of Anurag, right, is that the gopis always see Krishna newer and newer. Navanavam Priyam is quoted in Rujalimani. You understand? So they always see Krishna in a newer and newer way. So here, Vrindavane Apakrita means transcendental form of Madan or Cupid. So not mundane Cupid, but that transcendental Cupid. Who is that? In the Gopi Geet, in Srimad Bhagavatam, it is mentioned there, when the gopis recited one verse, which was the culmination of their loving sentiment. Yatte sujata charanam burunam saneshu. This is the last verse of Gopi Geet. Then Krishna immediately appears. Tasam avir bacha chori smaya manambo kambojam pitambara darasogri sakshat manmat manmat. When he appeared directly as the most enchanting form of a lover that the gopis aspire to see. But why is this Sakshat Manmat Manmat being mentioned? The gopis had already seen Krishna. They had gathered for Ras, then Radhika disappears, Krishna disappears to follow Radhika, etc., etc. So already they've seen Krishna. So what is this emphasis here that when he reappeared, it was Sakshat Manmat Manmat? Well, due to the influence of their separation and due to the influence of the nature of their praying, which is foundation in Anurag, they experience that Krishna is always more and more beautiful. You understand? So appearing now, Sakshat Manmat Manmat, he's the personification of the most beautiful form of our aspiration for conjugal dealings. You understand? So the Kam Gayatri, everything is there. So the mature form of Brahma Gayatri is there in Kam Gayatri. Right? So if you study the other elements of the mantras, they are all meant to give relationship to Shri Shri Radha and Krishna, who are present in the form of Harinam. Right? And there's no way to approach Shri Shri Radha Krishna Yugal the abode of Vrindavan, the savor in Vrindavan without going through Gaur Leela. Yata yata Gora Padin. What is this verse? Anyway, verse is saying that there's no way to approach Vrindavan Dham without going through Gaur Leela. You understand? So it must be. Gaurangera Nasanave Seturanga Jabe Dube Shi Radha Madhavantaranga, this sloka. Right? That one cannot really approach the realm of Vrindavan, right, without going through Gaur Leela. But if you'll dive deeply into Gaur Leela, then you will come up, right? If you submerge in Gaur Leela, you'll come up in the inner circle of the Leela of Radha and Krishna. Right? Gaurangera Rasanave Seturanga Javiduve Shri Radha Madhav Antaranga. So very deep meanings are here, but I'm explaining in general here. You'll come up in the inner circle of the mood of Radha and Krishna by diving deep into Gaur Leela. You understand? So, therefore, in our system of mantras, the mantra related to Mahaprabhu is also present there. But you cannot approach Mahaprabhu without approaching Guru. Therefore, Guru mantra and Guru Gayatri is also present there. Right? Because no access to Mahaprabhu unless you go through Sri Guru. Right? So, this is the relationship of Harinam to Diksha Mantras in brief. So then the question becomes, what is the nature, if Harinam can give everything, why do we need the Diksha Mantras? Well, because we don't have, unless we're like Haridas Thakur, where our acharyas have mentioned that the previous impressions of Haridas Thakur, he's giving the example that only by Nam he can have the full experiences of what is indicated by taking Diksha Mantras. But for the average jiva who is unfolding in the process, that depth of sanskar is not there. And therefore the Diksha Mantras serve to do exactly what I mentioned earlier, to create the depth of impression regarding relationship to Sri Harinam, which is non-different from Radha and Krishna. Right? So that's the reason why it's necessary for universally 99.9% of jivas who are following the path of bhakti that they must take Diksha Mantras. Therefore, Mahaprabhu himself demonstrates this. Even Sri Krishna himself demonstrates this, right? To show the importance of taking Diksha Mantras from Sri Guru. Mahaprabhu took mantra from Sri Ishvara Puripad, right? He's Bhagavan himself, but he took to set this example. Understand? And what was the last thing? Now I have to think. Anyway, I'm not thinking of this last topic. There were 3 different questions that were asked. I have to go back and look. I don't have my phone in front of me, so I'm not. But Prabhuji, I will go back and look and maybe answer that question via messenger. But I wanted to at least get the basic expression out of what was the difference, especially, or the importance and the speciality of the Diksha Mantras in relation to Harinam. Because that's a question for a lot of people, that if you have Harinam, what is the need of Diksha Mantras? Understand? All right, let me see if there's anything maybe more before concluding. Oh, the other 2 things that I mentioned about Rahasya and about the Dhyan of the Diksha Mantras is very important. That when you hear Diksha Mantras, it is not only the mantra artha chintan, contemplation of the meaning of the mantra, but there's a Rahasya to the mantra. And that Rahasya is the revealing of the very nature of the praying in relation to the jiva and to Shri Radha and Krishna. There's mysteries involved in that. Rahasya. So that will come by the nature of the dhyan. You understand? And the dhyan is when your sambandha dhyan is employed in your practice of bhakti in general, and then meditated on when you're performing anik or you're chanting of mantras. Right? So when you sit to chant the mantras, you're doing meditation, dhyan, on the rahasya of the mantra as well as the meaning of the words. You understand? Then, That dhyan gives rise to thickening your aspirations for that particular mood of service. Then when you come into the stage of nishta, then ruchi coming on the chitta means a particular kind of taste coming on the chitta via hearing Harikatha will strengthen that sense of aspiration for that kind of mood. In the stage of ashakti, then what is it? Tasya tadrasa sudakaraka bhasa samulasita hridaya spatikamani. Tadrasa ragatmakaya bhakti aparipatishu api ruchi jayate. At that time, an abhas of the mood of a particular associate which you've been meditating on and aspiring for will come on the chitta. It's at that time there is a conviction. Oh, I do or die, I must have this particular mood of service to Shri Krishna. And then by mercy of Shri Radha and Krishna and Shri Guru, at the time of bhavavas, means the time of bhav, Suddha Sattva Visheshatma, Suddha Sattva Visheshatma, Prema Suryangsa Samyabhak. Ruchi bis Chittamasranya. So that very Ruchi, Chittamasranya, will melt the chitta, dilute false ego and all these things away, giving rise to the ruchi related to that particular mood to serve Bhagavan. First, Bhagavan Deha Prat, to obtain the association of Bhagavan. And then, Anukula Bilas, the desire for rendering favorable service to Bhagavan. And then, Soharada Bilas. Soharada means like very intimately based in the affection of that mood, in parental affection, conjugal affection, fraternal affection, whatever it is. So at that time it will crystallize on the chitta and one can realize what is this swarup, what is this form. And then one will do bhajan in bhavavas to obtain prema. So a little difficult topic somewhat, but hopefully, Prabhuji, this was somewhat helpful. I'll go back and look on the phone or even review, because I think I mentioned that third category. And I will contact you by messenger to try to communicate answering that question if it was not answered in the course and context of what we spoke already. All right, my Dandavat Pranam. And thank you very much for your question, Prabhu, because I think for a lot of devotees it will be very helpful. It's also good for my own edification to repeat what I've heard from my Guru Parapadma and also understood from our Guru Vargas, right? Because by repeating these things, it also is very helpful to all of us, right? And then also, again, on this form, it allows for mature devotees to also chime in and to elucidate even more and therefore enrich our understanding. Because our mantras are very, very important. Therefore, we're instructed to chant these mantras 3 times a day. The meditation is not 3 times a day, right? Just like in our Guru Astakam, what is it? Yasya prasada bhagavad prasado, yasya prasada nagati kotopi. Dayam stuvam stasyasya shastri sanjam. Dhyayam means meditation. 3 sanjam means at the 3 junctures of the day. But here the indication was not, okay, I'll remember Guru Radha Krishna Mahaprabhu at noon, sunrise, noon, and sunset. The indication was throughout those periods of the day, I'll remember them. Throughout those periods of the day, Sri Harinam is performing Leela. What Leela? Ashtakalila Leela. Because Harinam, Radha and Krishna are directly there. And in Bhajan Rasa Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, in this Harinam is also all Ashtakalila Leela. You understand? So the idea is our meditation is not at sunrise, noon, and sunset. It's throughout the 3 periods of the day. But that should also be done in maturation, right? So we're not sort of using imagination and imposing, immature presentations in the more mature spaces of bhakti, right? So that we should be tempered, And so much is based on hearing Harikatha. So we can hear Harikatha about these things. And in hearing Harikatha will nourish greed. Because it is mature greed which is the fuel that brings bhakti to that level. Right? Tatra, what is this verse? Tatra lolya mulyam ekalam. Only thing really needed is lolya, means greed. Krishna bhakti rasi bhavatamati. Yari kriyatam yari kutopi labhyate. Wherever you find this kind of bhakti, run there to get that. And the only thing you need is lolyam or greed. Right? But that greed, see, sometimes also this is a confusion. Because that greed is a genuine greed. It is not just a notion. And it will be evidenced by how you apply yourself in bhakti as to whether that greed is genuine or it's just a notion to add on to another kind of enjoyment, except this time in the spiritual paradigm. So be careful. So yeah, so our greed should be genuine, and that will be reflected in the nature and course of our activities. You understand? How we are doing sadhan bhajan, right? How we're deepening our chanting, how we're deepening our hearing of Harikatha, how we're serving to Hari Guru and Vaishnava, right? So this becomes the evidence for the nature of that kind of greed. On the other hand, we should not mistake that the external appearance of those things is indicative of greed. Oh, you'll have to hear the Harikatha spoken by someone. And ultimately, it's a question of genuineness. Because you can't ascertain necessarily just from someone speaking or from external activities. But by the course of association over a period of time, you can glean something. You can glean something. All right, my Dhanavad Pranam. Vancha Kalpatruvesha Kripa Shindavevacha Patitinam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Gadadhara Sivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Jai Radhe Radhe, Jai Radhe Radhe.